Okay, so the very first problem says make a dot plot. I typed that title in really quick. I'm pretty sure I grabbed it from the right problem. That this is number of hours of sleep for the prior night for students in a particular college statistics class. Does that sound right?
Yeah.
Okay. The graph itself, I would imagine y'all didn't have issues with. There are a couple that were halves. You can write separate labels like 6.5, but does anybody have an issue that's 6.5? No. So if it's something like this, I mean, you could write all the halves if you wanted to, but this is fine as well. Make sure you have a label down here that is descriptive. Make sure you have a label here. Like I said, sometimes people put a label on the y-axis. For here, if you did, it would be what? Number of students. Like I said, dot plots aren't required to have that because each dot is an individual. As far as socks for this, I am being not, what I'm going to go over with socks today is not where I want to end up. I want to go over socks generally, but eventually it's going to be a lot more descriptive and a lot better than this. I just want to make sure that we're all on the right path for now. So I'll kind of talk about more than I would require today. So our first S is what?
Shape.
What are some things that y'all said, not like descriptions, just like what words did y'all use for shape here? Like keywords.
It peaks.
Peaks, which would make it what? Unimodal. So unimodal might be something people included. What else? Some people are going to say fairly symmetric. Some people might even say what? Right skewed. What else? That's probably about it for shape. So these are things I'm looking for now. But remember, you're going to end up incorporating context, numbers, and keywords. So like my keywords would be, or I haven't said keywords. Keywords would be like choosing if it's right skewed. I might lean a little bit more toward right skewed here, but I don't really care. So if we say it is, let's say it's fairly symmetrical. Let's say, because that's one of the first ones I heard. It's fairly symmetrical with one peak around what? Around 6 hours, which means what? In context.
Which means that most students get 6 hours.
Most students sleep about 6 hours of sleep with, and continue to explain symmetrical.
With a fair amount over it.
So with fewer students sleeping less than 6 and more than 8 or more than 9. So that's where we're going to get to. So it's going to be really long. Each one's going to be like a sentence or two. Right now, I'm making sure that we're there with the pieces. What's that? Outliers. Yes or no? I'd probably say no. What did I say is really important about your answer? Appears. There does not appear to be any outliers. If you didn't write that, write it in. Because you're making a note to yourself, hey, I didn't do it, I should do it. Why do I say appears right now? Because you don't know how to calculate it yet. So we just basically are saying we think or we don't think. So there do not appear to be any outliers. Going into what we will say, which means there are no what? What do the dots represent? One word. That means there are no students who got what? If there aren't any outliers. Uncharacteristically high or low amounts of sleep last night relative to the rest of the class. That would be a very strong sentence. I don't expect you to have written that right now, but that's where we're getting to. So do not appear to be any on either end, which means that there are no students in this class who slept a characteristically large or small amount of sleep last night relative to the other students in the class. What's that? Center. We've got two options right now. What's one of them? Mean. I don't have mean in front of me. Does anybody know what the mean was?
6.6.
6.6 what? I'm writing x bar equals, but we haven't talked about that yet, other than writing it on a piece of paper. So the mean is 6.64. What does that mean in context?
How'd you find it?
Added up all the numbers and then divided by how many were there? Do you remember?
There were like 47.
20 what? So you would add up all the numbers and then divide by 28 to get 6.64. What does it mean to be 6.64?
The sum of all students' hours of sleep.
So if we were to take all the students' cumulative hours of sleep and what? Distributed evenly, they would have each gotten 6.64 hours of sleep last night. That would be a very good description, even past today, yes.
Do you count like 4.5 and 6.5 as separate numbers, or do you just count the numbers to divide it by?
Say it again.
Like when you're calculating mean, would you count like the half numbers?
Yes, so like what the book actually had the numbers written out for you. So like when I were doing mean, I wouldn't look at this at all. I would look at it straight from the book and like literally type in the numbers because the numbers are as descriptive as they can be there. Because otherwise you're kind of going backwards, but then you won't have to worry about that issue. So median, if I were doing median, what do I do with 28?
Plus 1.
Plus 1 is 29. What do I do with 29? Which gives me, so it's somewhere in 6. So our median would be 6, which means what in context? Interpret. That means about
roughly equal numbers of people who slept less than 6 hours of sleep to those who slept more than 6 hours of sleep.
So about half slept at or less than 6 hours of sleep, and about 50% slept at or above 6 hours of sleep. And you don't have to say at or above, that gets kind of funny with, that's what we're saying about. What's my last S? Spread. The only thing we talked about right now is what? Range. What is the range? 8. What does that mean in context?
Most amount of students slept in the least amount of students slept very lightly hours.
And the way you're saying is absolutely correct. I always say it one way just to say it consistently, just because I'll have answer keys type like that, which is the exact same thing you just said. The student who slept the most slept 8 hours more than the student who slept the least. Just saying the exact same thing you just said. As we get into this, I'll start expecting you to have your developed answers like I'm saying as my last piece. Like the student who slept the most slept 8 hours more than the student who slept the less. I want your answers to start getting closer to that. I kind of see a mix in the class of how developed your answers were. The more developed your answers are, the better you're going to be at this. Number 39, it gave you the whole graph and just asked you things about it. What do the 2 dots above -2 represent?
The other teams have more points or goals than the rest for that.
And more specific?
They lost
By?
2.
They lost by 2, which is just the finishing touch of what y'all just said. They lost by how much? They lost by 2. The team outscored them by 2, however you want to say that. What does this bar graph tell us about how well the team did in 2004?
They won more than 82.35% of their games.
And that's really helpful. Like, we always talk about context, numbers, compare, that kind of thing. Throwing in data like that is helpful.
And then they tied with their opponents in 4 games and lost 2.
You can get really descriptive about this answer. Pull in proof, I guess. So things that you're saying that 80 whatever % of the time they won. They only lost twice, which you might want to say they only lost something % of the game, % of the time.
They didn't often score 5 or more points than their opponents.
They didn't often score more than 5 points more than their opponents. Give me 2 more things that we can say about it. They tied 4 games. We have one more thing.
They lost 2.
They only lost 2. I know y'all don't have it in front of you, so I mean, you're going off what you wrote, and y'all probably wrote a lot of the same stuff. But realize that before our class, you should tell me things like they lost twice, they won all but two. Start getting into this week, you should be giving me more developed answers like the majority of the time they won by between 1 and 4 goals, like things like that. So get more descriptive about your answers. Hopefully you're starting to see that transition of what we expect in this class versus what you would have been able to do before you got here. And then 46. This one already had the graph made for you. They did a split stem. One thing that I want to mention, just because I always forget to mention it, and I don't want you to get confused. They did a split stem. This one was 5, 5, 6. I don't remember what the rest of the numbers were. So they didn't include that. Why did they not include that? Because there weren't any there. If there weren't any here, would I have to include it? Yes. So what's the difference?
It's the beginning.
So you don't have to start until your first number is there, even if you're leaving out some numbers. Same thing on this end. But if there's anything in between that doesn't have anything on that row, then you still need to include it, because that would be a gap, which is really important. So why do you think they split stems?
Because there was just a lot of value, especially in like the high 20 area.
A lot of values, especially like in the 20s. So what would you not be able to see in a regular stem plot that you would in a split stem? What would you better see in a split stem?
The shape of
You would better see the representation of the shape, as opposed to before we split it, you wouldn't get that much description out of the shape because it's kind of just clumped together. An appropriate key for this graph, it doesn't matter which number you pick. Let's say I picked, what would this be?
25.
What?
There's no grams of caffeine right now serving.
Milligrams of caffeine. I'm not done. This is why I'm taking the time to write it on the board.
Of a particular top frame.
I think I said A last time, but I don't know. They're all soft drinks, right? Carbonated beverage. This is the part that people tend to leave off. You're saying it's of a specifically selected one, essentially. So don't forget your context. It's like the milligrams of caffeine per 8 ounce serving, but it's of one that we chose, not of overall. It's just of one of them. All right, so now that we have a split stem, I'm going to go a little bit quicker because I think y'all are okay with understanding the development of how our socks are going to go. I want to make sure we get through everything and have plenty of time for the quiz. What would the shape be? What did you guys say a shape? I would probably say right skewed. I mean, some people might still say fairly symmetrical. I think it's a little bit more right skewed than symmetrical. If I got into that, that means the majority or a lot of them had lower numbers, like in the 20s, whereas the higher they got, the fewer soft drinks contained that much caffeine. Outliers, yes, no. No, which means there do not appear, again, there do not appear to be any outliers, which means there are no selected carbonated beverages with uncharacteristically low or high amounts of caffeine per 8 ounce serving relative to the others. C, center. What is the mean?
28.66.
28.66. What was the median? It might have been the 19.5 number, but what's the median?
38 was one of the two. 39 of the two.
But what
Oh,
is
where does it occur? It
Yeah.
occurs at the 2.
20 what? I think it's 28.
Yeah.
Do I need to go over how to do that if there are issues?
Yes.
All right, how many numbers were there? 30 what? 38. I'm not typing out all the numbers because we don't need to get there. There are numbers past that. I don't need to get there. So 38. So what do I do with 38? Plus 1. 39. 39 divided by 2. What? 19.5. They're already in order here. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20. So it's there. Well, how do I take the middle of those two numbers? What is the middle of those two numbers? 28. What if it fell here? What would the median be? 26 and a half. So make sure you don't just stop with what the nth number that it is. Make sure you actually find that number to see what the median is. If you interpreted this, about half of the soft drinks have less than 28 milligrams per 8 ounce serving. About 50% have more than 28 milligrams of caffeine per 8 ounce serving. Or you could say average. You could say if you added them all up and divided by how many there were and split it equally, added up all the caffeine and divided it equally among the different soft drinks, there would be about, whatever you said, 28 point something milligrams per drink. Spread, as of right now, we have very basic, which is what? What's the measure of spread we deal with? Range. What is the range for this? So the soft drink that had the selected soft drink that had the most caffeine had 32 milligrams more than the soft drink that had the least. Questions with the homework and me kind of trying to go over a little bit quicker than I wanted to.